What's up? It's Eden, and this is what I read this week. So, Babel. By the way, on my previous video, I pronounced it as Babel, which is the British pronunciation of this word. And I saw an interview with the author and she pronounced it as Babel, which makes sense because this is the American pronunciation of this word and she's an American author. So yeah, I'm going to pronounce it as Babel the way she intended in this video. So yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, I've been waiting to talk about this book for a while now because my goodness, I have so much to say about it. I'm pretty late to the party on this one, so you probably know all about it by now. But if not, and just in case, I'll break the video into a few sections so you can just skip through whatever is irrelevant for you. So let's start with the basic plot line. No spoilers here, so no worries. The story follows Robin Swift, an orphaned boy from Canton who was brought to London by an English professor. And the professor ensures that Robin is highly educated in topics like Latin, ancient Greek, and Chinese, with the goal that one day he'll join Oxford University's Royal Institute of Translation, aka Babel. And basically the story continues to follow Robin and his friends and their experiences at Oxford. It's a fantasy story with a magic theme that is set in Oxford in the early 19th century. Now, a bit about the author. I always love learning about the authors of the books that I read because A, I find it very interesting, and B, I think it gives the book that I'm reading another dimension. So Rebecca Kuang, she is an American fiction writer and she has an impressive background in Chinese studies. She immigrated to the US from China at the age of 4 and she holds an MPhil in Chinese studies, an MSc in contemporary Chinese studies, and currently she's in the final stages of her PhD in East Asian languages and literature at Yale University, meaning she is super smart, and her vast knowledge of languages and translation, especially the Chinese language, is very evident in the book. Now, because these topics are essential to her, she easily dragged me into this world of language and meaning, and through her passion, it's basically very easy to become passionate about it too. Now, I appreciate authors who don't underestimate their readers' intelligence. And just a very random side note, in children's literature, for example, there's this tendency to believe that the plots are very simple, but in high quality children's literature, the authors treat their young audience as complex thinkers who are worthy of a serious and well thought plot and writing style. As C.S. Lewis once said, a children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest. And I couldn't agree more. So back to Kuang, her writing style on the one hand is very detailed, very rich, very dense with information, and all is coated with an easiness that makes you want to read more. You'll even want to look into the references mentioned in the book and read more about them. And that is especially the case when she writes about language and translation. However, on the other hand, concerning the imperialism theme in the book, it feels as though she is trying to impose her opinion and sounds a bit more like a coerced narrator. Funny enough, that was a very popular type of narrator during Victorian times, and that's the time she writes about. Here too, that narrating style is a bit too pushy and describes lectures and discussions among characters in detail about how bad colonialism is, as if to impose an unpopular opinion upon readers. And in my opinion, she paid a heavy price for this approach, because the result was a massive book that, apart from the main character, lacks the development of other characters, and other themes like the magic theme were underdeveloped as well. What I mean is that when writing about colonialism and racism, it felt as if Kuang in fact underestimated her readers. For example, the book has lots of footnotes. Now, I love footnotes. I don't mind having loads of them, but the footnotes too often seem to state the obvious, as if to ensure the readers got the basics of imperialism and racism. And I think it would have been much better if Kuang would have trusted her 21st century readers to understand the basics and popular to our time approaches to imperialism and racism, and use this space to develop the other quite essential characters and themes in the book. To me, it felt as though the beginning of the book started very strong, at a good pace, developing the main character and unfolding the plot brilliantly. And then from about book 3, the pace increased so much and the rest of the plot became so unbelievable, where things happened out of the blue and then it ended. Similarly, in terms of the magic theme in the book, which started as very intriguing but continued to be very annoying, it was as well so underdeveloped that every time magic was involved, I needed a break. I would have loved it if Kuang kept magic and fantasy out of the book and stuck in the historical side she demonstrated in the beginning, and making it a historical fiction book and not a fantasy one. Another reason why I won't give this 5 stars is because the dark academia genre that, in my opinion, was misused. You probably know what dark academia is by now, but if not, I'll give you a sort of crash course on it. So dark academia is an internet aesthetic that revolves around idealizing academia, philosophy, classic literature, and fosters the pursuit of knowledge. It encourages an appreciation for art and history, and is often set in old, dusty libraries or prestigious universities with Gothic architecture, with dark atmosphere and dark tones and vintage style. As beautiful as it may sound to some of us, there are some problematic elements in this genre, like its Eurocentric and white-dominated nature, or that it can promote unhealthy behaviors, or the fact that it romanticizes stress and late-night studying and so on. Now, I'm not supporting that, of course, but as an aesthetic, it's one that I really love. What can I say? I'm drawn to this intense desire for learning and how it can take you down a rabbit hole of information that you just don't want to stop exploring. And this notion of constant learning and engaging in philosophical debates and pondering thought-provoking questions is just so captivating for me. I also love this appreciation for literature, art, and history. And for me, just the thought of being surrounded by tall bookshelves in old libraries and sniffing dusty old books and reading for hours next to candlelight. I don't know, makes me so uplifted. Now, this aesthetic has been around for a while, but it gained its popularity over the pandemic, perhaps because many couldn't physically be part of their academic institutions. So romanticizing studying with this aesthetic perhaps made them feel more included and motivated them to study. Now, in movies, you can find this aesthetic in films like The Dead Poets Society, Tolkien, The Theory of Everything, Mona Lisa's Smile, The Imitation Game, and so on. And many books also falls under this dark academia genre. Books such as Maurice, The Goldfinch, Harry Potter, particularly the first 4 books. Oscar Wilde's works are associated with it, but probably the one most referred to is The Secret Society by Donna Tartt. And if you want a video on that, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about it too. And Babel also falls into this dark academia genre. And here too, the setting is at Oxford University of the early 19th century, which Robin perceives as a Gothic sanctuary upon his highly anticipated arrival. Also, the romanticization of the pursuit of knowledge at any cost is highly present in the book. For example, take this passage. Failure of memory was only the first symptom to come. Never had Robin's anxiety over his marks made him so physically ill. First came a persistent, throbbing headache, and then the constant urge to throw up every time he stood or moved. Waves of tremors kept coming over him with no warning. Often his hand shook so hard that he had difficulty gripping his pen. Once during a practice paper, he found his vision blacking out. He couldn't think, couldn't remember a single word, couldn't even see. It took him nearly 10 minutes to recover. He couldn't make himself eat. He was somehow both exhausted all the time and unable to sleep from surplus of nervous energy. Then, like all good Oxford upperclassmen, he found himself losing his mind. His grip on reality, already tenuous from sustained isolation in a city of scholars, became even more fragmented. Hours of revision had interfered with his processing of signs and symbols, his belief in what was real and what was not. The abstract was factual and important. Daily exigencies like porridge and eggs were suspect. Everyday dialogue became a chore. Small talk was a horror. And he lost his grip on what basic salutations meant. When the porter asked him if it had a good one, he stood still and mute for a good 30 seconds, unable to process what was meant by good or indeed one. But the dark side of the dark academia genre, this sense of melancholy and foreboding, along with the characters' existential crises that are part of this genre, took a twisted turn here. The fast pace of events combined with underdeveloped characters created an unreliable plot that is really hard to believe and be convinced could happen, even in an imaginative world. Hey, I'm just popping in here because I realized now that what I said here is not very clear and doesn't clarify my point very well. So my point was that Kuang misused this genre because the characters' actions and the melancholic atmosphere were so extreme and arrived so fast when the plot was not ready for it. So it created this unbelievable story that for me it was really hard to relate to. overall, when I finished reading, I was left with the feeling that it was a complete waste of my time, especially when it takes quite some time to get through it. I was so disappointed because when I started the book, I thought, this is it. This is going to be my all-time favorite book. I thought it was written in a brilliant way. So yeah, the disappointment was so great. Now looking back, I'm happy I read it because at least it gave me that feeling at the beginning, which I haven't felt for a while. But as a whole, I wouldn't recommend it. So that's my take on Babel. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more bookish discussions. Other than that, thank you so much for watching and enjoy whatever you're reading right now.